But just for the record, I said, just for the record, I didn't get a standing ovation, so congratulations.
I paid them to stay seated for you so it would look better when I came in. Thank y'all so much for being here. I know how difficult it is to take any time away from your day, but especially right in the middle of the workday. And so we really appreciate your willingness to be here and to engage in a back and forth discussion. There have been a lot of things said, talked about, written about when it comes to Arkansas Learns, and wanted to have the opportunity to come directly, answer questions that you may have, but also talk about some of the great things that we know Learns will do specifically for this area of the state. Really excited to have several members of our state legislature that are here today: Senator Caldwell, Representative Hollowell, Senator Murdoch, and Representative McElroy, who represent large parts of the Delta and have been great partners most of the time. Every once in a while we all are on different things, but we have a great working relationship with members of our state legislature, and most importantly, we have a great real deal of respect for one another, and there has been wonderful exchange of ideas. In fact, some of the things that you will see and that we will talk about today in Learns came from one of the very first trips I took as governor. See, Coach McGee, that's the only way I know him from our days at Central High together. But I came here, and Jacob, I think it was your very first week on the job. One of the very first stops I did was in this area where we gathered superintendents, principals, toured through schools, and met and talked about education and how it was the most important thing that we could focus on as a state. And we took some of the things from that discussion and included them into the final piece of legislation. And that's exactly why it's exciting to be back here now that it has passed and get to talk about what we know is going to transform from the amazing things included in Arkansas Learns. Is it a perfect piece of legislation? No, but it is an unbelievably strong starting point for our state. At the end of the day, I'm tired of Arkansas being at the bottom. I'm tired of Arkansas being 47th and 48th and 49th, and in some cases 50th in all the places that I want us to be first and second. And frankly, all the places I know we're capable of being first and second. And the best place that we can start to move those numbers up is with education. That's why we've spent the last 7 months working so tirelessly on promoting, passing, and now implementing Arkansas Learns. This isn't just something that we think will tinker with the system, because frankly, tinkering with the system that we have right now is not going to bring about the transformational change that I know is needed to really see our students go to the next level. But this is a total overhaul, because that's what we had to see. I think everybody in this room, you're here because you want something different. You want something better for our students than the failed status quo that we have been giving them for too long. Does that mean that we don't have amazing people involved in Arkansas education? Absolutely not. Some of the best, some of the brightest, some of the smartest educators anywhere in the country are right here in Arkansas. It's why one of the most critical, important parts of Arkansas Learns was rewarding our great teachers. We know that a student is going to do better when they have a great teacher. So retaining and recruiting our best and brightest from all over is so important. It's why we took that salary from $36,000 to $50,000. That is a monumental shift. That took Arkansas from being 48th in the country to top 5 overnight. And that is something that the state is on the hook to pay for. That's not something that ultimately then falls back on the district. That's something we have committed to fund in perpetuity, meaning every dollar that a district got before Arkansas Learns, they still get. Now they just get additional funding on top of that to cover the increase in teacher salaries. We also know one of the biggest, most important things that determines a student's long-term success is whether or not they can read. Having an intense focus on literacy programs across the state can transform a student. We can look at all of the data points. One of the most startling ones to me is that if you look at our incarceration rate across the state of Arkansas, 70% of those who are incarcerated can't read. That tells us a lot. That means we aren't doing a very good job. And right now, Arkansas is failing to meet some of the most basic benchmark data points when it comes to literacy. And Arkansas Learns is a huge investment in that. It's one of the reasons I'm really proud of it. We're creating opportunity for every student to have a pathway to success. And we want to make sure that we help each person know about those opportunities, which is why we're here today. And we're thankful for your willingness to spend some time with us. Like I said, we want this to be a discussion and open it up to take questions. We will take as many questions as we can possibly get to. And again, want to thank you for being in the room. Want to thank you for being parents, for being educators, for being superintendents, business leaders, because it takes all of us working together, coming together to see the implementation of this be successful. So thank you for taking time to be here with us today, and we look forward to a great discussion back and forth. And with that, I think Becca on our team has the first question, then we'll open it up. If you have a question, just raise your hand after this. But Becca, if you want to kick us off.
Nicole Baker has the first question. Nicole Baker.
Oh, right over here. Right here.
I wanted to know, I'm Nicole Baker, I'm Nicole Baker, CEO of the Boys and Girls Club of Phillips County here, and we want to support the school districts and the schools and the students with their learning, and especially the literacy piece, where the kids are there an additional 4 hours after school. So I was wanting to know if there was some additional funding or some sources that we can use at the Boys and Girls Clubs to assist those students.
Absolutely. There are two pieces that I think are pretty critical that would tie directly into that. First, is the state is funding $500 tutoring grants that could be used specifically at a place like the Boys and Girls Club. If you had a tutoring program specifically focused on literacy, I'll let Jacob give a little bit more detail on how that works, but that's a very direct funding resource where you could engage and help students right here in your community that is fully funded by the state of Arkansas. That's not taking money from any other program. That's new money allocated specifically for up to $500 in tutoring grants per student. In high needs area, which a lot of the counties and districts in this area would certainly qualify. The second place is one of the things that some people were pretty negative about, frankly, that I think is one of the best parts of Arkansas Learns, and that is the community service requirement for a student to graduate. There are certainly some waivers that can be instituted for individuals that may not be able to meet that, but getting students in high school to engage in their community, one, it brings people into a facility like yours. It helps you create a new volunteer base. It also helps people see and get to know people like yourself that can be mentors, people who have built their own success story that they may not see any other place. And they'll get to see it right there in their own backyard. And it helps create a collaborative approach, building those relationships. So not only do they have a mentor, they're giving back. In many cases, they get to point back to something and say, I helped do this. Whether they came and helped, volunteer coach one of the smaller kids' basketball programs. I grew up playing basketball. We talked about this earlier at the Boys and Girls Club in Texarkana. I wasn't that good because they let everybody be on the team, and my mom was the coach, which certainly helped me get on. I only let her coach 1 year, and I never wanted to play for her again because she made us run so much. But it allows those students to engage, and they can point back to something where they say, I helped coach this team. I did that. It gives them a point of pride and a way for their community not only to invest in them, but them to invest in their community as well. And I think there's a great ability to partner, and I would love to see you work with some of the local high schools to help a lot of those students meet that community service requirement, because I think not only will it benefit the Boys and Girls Club, at the end of the day, which I know is why you guys exist, it will 100% benefit those students. Jacob?
And if I was to add to that, one, thank you for the service you provide to the students and families. It's an initiative and it's an opportunity that every community has. So anytime we can meet with external partners that work directly hand in hand with schools and school districts, that's a win for the entire community. And to even be an external partner that's really concerned about literacy, because the reality is when you look at where our students are, and we talked, Governor Sanders talks about that third grade benchmark. Are students ready to continue reading to learn from fourth grade and on? That's pivotal in those foundational years, because explicit systematic instruction based on phonics and phonemic awareness tends to get further away. So we have that benchmark when we look at readiness rates, and we talk about 35% of the third graders were meeting that readiness rates. Well, our new data that just came out from this last fall shows that that went down 2.8%. So there is a direct need, and there's a direct correlation to students meeting readiness rates and being successful by at least graduating from high school, and that's a benchmark that we want to see. So we talked about when we identify those students, we're getting ready to roll out, and it should be by the 1st of October, how parents can access additional dollars to support tutoring for K1, 2, and 3 students. But then on top of that, we're getting ready to do a partnership by October 1st with all of our school districts based on high impact tutoring. So part of the LEARNS initiatives allocated almost $20 million to directly go to high impact tutoring, because we know there's gaps in students learning that they need additional support beyond the school days. So we'd love to talk to folks like you and the Boys and Girls Club on how we can reinforce what's happening during the school day and after school programs as well.
If you have a question, be sure just to raise your hand, and either Levi or Becca can bring a microphone over to you. I think we have one other question that was submitted ahead of time online. Levi, if you want to go to that, and then just raise your hand up high and we'll come to you
Yes,
next.
Miss Linda Toulis. Miss Linda Toulis.
Oh, here.
Okay. I'm the superintendent at McGee School District, and I think you've already answered part of my question, and that was, will we be responsible for the extra money for the 50,000, the 2,000 in years to come? And you said that no, we would not, that you would give this that into the future. But the second part of that is that we have such wonderful veteran teachers who only got the $2,000 because we don't have the extra income or revenue to give them more. And those are the mentors for these young ones that you gave the $50,000 to, and they deserve more. So my question is, in the future, are you looking to give us more?
Let me start with the first piece on the initial pay increase going from the 36 base salary to the 50,000. Far and away, this is one of the things that we've seen. The data suggest how important it is not only to retain a lot of our teachers, but to recruit new teachers into the field, was to increase that salary. But not only for our team, but also the legislators that we worked with to craft this legislation, it was incredibly important that we reward those people who had already been in the classroom, who may have already been making above $50,000. So we wanted every single teacher in the state to get something. That's not a final something, but we wanted them to at least get an additional pay bump. And so we included and have funded, again, not just in the immediate, but in perpetuity, the state is on the hook to not only fund the increase from the 36 to 50,000, but for every single teacher in the state to get $2,000. We also removed some of the difficulties that a district has to reward veteran teachers. We're giving ultimate flexibility to you, to the district, to make decisions. You know better than I do if you have a math teacher that is absolutely outstanding that you desperately need to keep in the classroom, you need the flexibility to be able to pay that veteran math teacher more to stay in the classroom. But you may not need, a computer science specialist quite as much. So we've given you flexibility to increase those individual salaries and put the power into the hands of the district. Every single dollar we were giving before, we're still giving. Now we're just giving substantially more funding on top of that for pay raises for every single teacher in perpetuity. In addition to that, we've also included some other incentives, up to $10,000 for teachers that are willing to go into high need areas, high impact subject matters, as well as merit increases based on both growth and achievement. Because it's not fair to simply look at the growth. You have to look at the starting place of where those students may have shown up to that classroom in. And so there are a lot of incentives that I think would directly apply to a district like yours that teachers can go after. One of the other things that we did to incentivize some of those teachers that have maybe been in the classroom for a while, or newer teachers as well, is to pay back the student loans from the state. And so people, again, that are willing to go into those high demand, high subject areas, we're willing to take on, and the state will cover the cost of their student loans and help make those payments. And so there are a lot of different things that incentivize teachers, but ultimately when it comes to rewarding veteran teachers, the pay scale is now at the hands of the district. The state already, one of the things people don't know is that the state already gives about $75,000, give or take a little bit, to every district for the salaries of teachers. We've given that flexibility now for you to be able to move that up and down so that you can keep those best and brightest teachers in the classroom. But if there's somebody maybe that's been there a long time and you're ready to help bring in fresh blood, now you have the ability to do that as well. And ultimately the flexibility and the decision-making power is at the hands of the districts, because you know what your community needs a lot better than we do at the state a couple hours away.
And if I was to add to that, I would say you're right. As a former teacher, as a former principal, as a former superintendent, the lifeblood of a school district is those veteran teachers who know their families. They take in new teachers. I remember my first year being a teacher, being assigned a mentor, and without that mentor, I would have struggled greatly, because you're learning a lot very quickly, and they're there to model and encourage. And we want to always be clear, we extremely value and want to celebrate and elevate the impact that our veteran teachers have. The salary schedule, as Governor Sanders kind of explained, with the foundation funding that districts historically receive, is kind of one pot of money. The pot of money to raise the salaries and make sure that everybody gets $2,000 is a separate pot of money, so that we're able to protect this and you're able to have that flexibility to build a salary schedule that meets your needs. But there wasn't a single step on the old salary schedule that was at least $2,000. So everybody got a bigger step than they would have received if we had stayed on the historical one. So I always want to say to the governor, thank you, and on behalf of teachers, thank you, and to the legislature, because that's a big deal. Does it end there? No. So we had to start from somewhere. And the reality, especially in a region like this one, I want to say there's about 6 school districts in this region where not one teacher made $50,000. So we have truly invested in elevating and helping school districts here be able to recruit. They were losing teachers in neighboring districts just because they couldn't compete. So as we go and work with the legislature in upcoming budget cycles, in upcoming sessions, do we want to ask for more dollars to recognize, to give you flexibility to prioritize your needs? 1,000%. I mean, I'm always going to advocate for more money towards education. And then additionally, as we've been listening and hearing too, is supporting the classified staff as well. We know it takes everybody in a school district to make it work, and everybody working together. So I know the governor recognizes that and appreciates that and knows it's a big deal.
Yeah, in fact, if I could just piggyback on that, we included close to $20 million in additional funding from the state specifically for classified staff, so that those hourly wages could also be increased. Because as Jacob likes to say, it takes the entire educational community. It's not only the teachers that interact, but the cafeteria workers, the bus drivers, and a lot of the other staff that come alongside them. And so putting and elevating those roles as well was something that was really important in this legislation, so that everybody who has a part to play, we are increasing the salaries because we know the value that that brings. One of the other things, if I could, just to not to harp on this topic for too long, but I know it's a big top of mind for a lot of people. One of the things that we heard from that initial meeting that I mentioned in my opening remarks was being able to have homegrown talent right here in the Delta. So often, one of the things that we heard is that they would have a teacher who was a great teacher who started here and did a year and then realized, you know what, I can go make a lot more money at a district an hour away. And because they were only paying $38,000, $39,000, it was very easy to find another job teaching almost anywhere else in the state. But now, because that base level salary is at $50,000, it's going to help keep and retain a lot of the best teachers in the Delta right here, so that you can continue to grow your own talent and keep them in the classroom, which is ultimately the goal, because those people are going to have a connection to the community and an investment unlike anybody else. And so that was a big part of the factor in increasing that base salary as well. And with that, we're happy to open up. I know there was a question somewhere here on the front row. Yeah.
Successful here in town, Betty and Buford Armstrong. My father was raised very poorly. He was raised with very wonderful parents who were poor. They instilled in him the love of reading and writing, and they made sure he went to school. He was a president of his class. My mother was a vice president. She opened a nursing school here, and my father spent 25 years in the Navy and opened a restaurant here that was 25 years successful. His love for reading is his claim for fame. So to instill in our children here, which are our future, the love of reading, maybe with the extracurricular stuff, we should include children reading, and to read out loud, to read to other children, and maybe the bigger kids reading, to instill the love of reading. It made my father successful, made my mother successful, and that's what I think we should focus a lot of our attention on, is instilling the love of reading, because children are afraid of it.
I couldn't agree with you more. It's the reason that the very first letter in our plan is literacy, also because you can't really spell learns without putting the L at the top, but it's also because it's such a key priority. It is the number one make or break data point for any student's success. And right now, frankly, as a state, we are not doing a great job. As of today, Arkansas third graders, the highest levels, on average, about 35% across the state of our third graders are reading at or above a grade level. And in many cases, and in some of the counties and districts we're in right now, it's less than 10% of our third graders are reading at or above third grade reading level. And we know that it is a make or break. Up until third grade, you're learning to read, and after third grade, you're reading to learn. So if you haven't learned that critical need, it's not just a love, it is an absolute necessity for a student to be successful, is to be able to read. It's why we've invested so much into the literacy program here in the state. We've seen other states. We didn't just sit around and say, you know what, this would be really fun, let's see what works. This is all evidence-based solutions on how the best way to help not only catch students up, but give them a really solid foundation. One of the biggest things that we've seen make a difference in other states that are very similar to Arkansas, a state like Mississippi, who used to fight with us at the bottom, 49th and 50th, is now 22nd in the country in reading, and has left us in the dust because they put a focus on this. They started putting resources towards it, and they started deploying reading coaches all over their state into the highest need areas, which is exactly what we're doing. We've already hired 75 reading coaches since the passage of Learns that will go directly into districts, because a teacher probably has 25, maybe more, but probably on average about 25 students in their classroom. And if they have 5 or 6 that are falling really far behind, they have to stop and move everything down to catch up those 5 or 6, which hurts the ones at the top, loses the ones in the middle, and a lot of times those 5 or 6 are still not getting the full attention they need to really bring them up. So these literacy coaches will come into the districts, come into the classroom, so that that teacher can focus on the other 19 students, while the reading coach can help catch those students up, so everybody gets to be successful at the end of the day. Because we know investing in literacy is investing in our state's long-term future. So I couldn't agree with you more, and we're going to continue to look for ways that we make the numbers right now are pretty dismal. To me, they're completely unacceptable, and we're going to change that, and we're going to do that through the Learns program.
Yeah, and part of the investment that we talk about, that third grade metric, another one that was really imperative, and it was a big part of Learns that kind of sometimes gets a little bit overshadowed, is what are we doing in the early learning space and looking at kindergarten readiness. And currently in the state, depending on which program funds the early learning initiative, determines which agency or division oversees and decides what does kindergarten readiness look like. So it's a fragmented system that's not going to be unified and coordinated and all put under one umbrella, because we know that access, especially in regions like we're in now, for parents, if they want access to high quality early learning environments, we talk about Boys and Girls Club, or access to high quality childcare programs, there's some deserts and islands. And one of the first things that Governor Sanders tasked our agency with through an executive order was to do a report and start identifying where those gaps exist, and then start coming up with a plan and how we're going to address that. So looking at kindergarten readiness, looking at third grade readiness, and making sure that every child has access to a teacher that's trained, that's qualified, that can provide grade level instruction and intervention and acceleration opportunities is something that's critical.
Yes, sir.
And I'm with the radio station here, FM 94.5, and we talk a lot about education through the years, and it seems like we're dealing with a lot of symptoms, but the most powerful and most valuable part of education is parenting and what goes on in the home. Through the years, as we did broadcast programs about education, it is tough on the teachers. The teachers got to deal with what comes out of the home, and it makes it a lot tough on them. And so one question I want to ask is that what has been done to educate parents in terms of the value and the importance of education, and they have to help so that the teacher's job won't be as tough. Also, a number of years ago, I have 9 kids and I homeschool all of my kids. We went to the state legislature to speak to the education committee to try to get them to change the sports curriculum in terms of allowing, like they did with Tim Tebow down in Florida, where homeschool kids can participate in the sports. And when I got into the committee, I was shocked at the rivalry and the fighting between charter schools and the public schools. As a matter of fact, the people that were with me, I said, man, if you got a war going on between these two entities, we homeschoolers don't have a chance. So what I'm wondering is that is not healthy when you have all the entities fighting for money. That is a problem. And what is the status of all of that? And what can we do to stop that? Education has to be important to everybody.
I completely agree. First of all, God bless you for homeschooling 9 kids. I have 3. I have a daughter who's 11 and 2 boys who are 9 and 8. And we, like every family across the country, had to homeschool our kids during the pandemic, and we found out really quickly that that was not the lifetime path for us. So we had a lot of disciplinary notices from both the students and the teachers in our homeschool community of 5. And so I am amazed that you were able to do that with 9. I found out 2 third grade math had gotten really hard since I had been there. And my daughter loved to point out that I was doing it all wrong. And so here we are. She's definitely in a different program, not under my tutelage anymore, and thriving and doing really well. So we have a great deal of respect for the homeschool community and families. Quick update, the Tim Tebow law did pass here in Arkansas. And so now homeschool students can participate in sports in both charter and public school opportunities. And so that is an option. But one of the big things, at the end of the day, government cannot fix what's going on in every home. We can certainly make the environment at the schools they attend better, and there is no question that we are asking teachers to take on an enormous amount. Used to, their job was simply teaching reading and writing. Now they have to be psychologists, they have to be behavioral specialists, they have to be counselors, friends, coaches. About 100 other things are being put on the shoulders of teachers because kids are showing up with a whole lot of things that are not just academic. And so that's one of the reasons, frankly, that we did put such a priority on raising their salaries. We want them to understand the value that we think that they have. But we can't expect a teacher to fix every problem, the same way we can't expect government to fix every problem. We can't go into every home, and frankly, I don't think anybody wants us to. The last thing we need is government intrusion into private homes. But what we can do is create a better environment and a lot more opportunity and choice for parents, and create more pathways for individual students to be successful. That's one of the very foundations of what Arkansas Learns does. And that doesn't just mean choice to a private school. One of the big things, and I hate to keep harping back on that first meeting that you were a part of right here, was having the ability to have choice between even public schools and charter schools in the region. So if one school has an amazing vocational program through welding or something, a student could go to another district and take part in that program. That's one of the things included in Learns. It opens up more flexibility, more options. Also through charter schools, this is another opportunity for more students to have a different pathway. If they're not getting what they need at the school that they're assigned to, we want to open that up and help students. Also, homeschool families can participate in the education freedom accounts and get funding for things like curriculum, textbooks, specific school supplies. So we're trying to create as many options for each student to have a pathway to success, so that if they're not having their needs met, they're not pinned down in a broken system, and creating that greater opportunity. It's not perfect, but it's definitely a step in the right direction.
And I think to add to that is and part of the Learns initiative is really empowering parents and making sure that parents know that there's options for them, and those options are going to be high quality options. And I always like to say, parents have a lot going on in their lives. The schools can't do it all alone. In fact, I recently was reading a report on educational improvement, and data statistic in there that said between the ages of 6 and 18, 90% of a child's life is spent outside of school, right? So what are those community opportunities? What is the faith-based opportunities to get students connected to civic programs? Why we want them to volunteer and be engaged? Because anytime someone's engaged in a structured environment, they're learning. I truly believe that parents believe in the schools. They believe they're...
That's one of his 9 kids calling.
Yeah.
She's probably asking if you're buying her lunch, so you better hurry up. And
It's very patriotic too. I almost feel like doing the pledge, but it's okay. Parents typically are going to choose for their children to participate in their neighborhood school because that's where they're connected, that's where they went to school. This is what we're trying to do, is make sure that those opportunities for those students and families are the best that they can obviously be. I always like to say our parents are keeping our best and brightest at home, right? So they're going to send their children to school. And I think working with districts and prioritizing how we can make sure that parents are engaged about what's happening in the classroom and how they can reinforce and support it. I've been pulling a lot of data because it's that time of year in the summer. And as communities, we need to talk about the value of just getting kids to come to school. So there's a metric that we have, it's called chronically absent students, meaning they miss 10% or more of the school year, which on a typical school calendar means they miss 18 days of school for whatever reason. 18% of our students were chronically absent last year in this state, meaning they're not coming to school. The worst grade level for chronic absenteeism is kindergarten. 1 in 4 students in this state last year missed more than 10% of the school year. And the research is really clear that if you're chronically absent in pre-K, kindergarten, first and second grade, you're almost 100% at risk of needing interventions as a reading student. If you are not chronically absent, just meaning you come to school in pre-K, K1 and 2, you're almost 100% likely to be a proficient reader. So there's things that I think we can do, and working with districts and coming up with strategies to support parents, because parents want what's best for their child. I truly believe that. I don't think there's a parent in this community that says, I hope these schools fail my kids, because that's our goal. That's not going to happen. They believe in our schools, and we want to support them.
we'll jump over here. I think there was a question in the corner. Then we'll come back to you guys.
Yes, Clyde Newell from Mariana, Lee County. My concern for this legislation that's coming as far as revolutionize in education is all schools in this region, in the Delta, are not equal and not equitable when it comes to facilities. So there's some areas, there's some school districts whose facilities are not adequate or equitable at all. So where are we with that?
So school facility, and when we talk about facilities, we get into what we call capital funding, which is a little bit different than operating funding. So the LEARNS initiative doesn't necessarily address capital projects. There's other initiatives that the legislature supports through special projects and identifies, and there's actually ratios and factors that go into measuring school buildings, and they call it wet, dry, and safe space or something along those lines, to make sure there's some basic foundations of facilities, because the last thing we want is to send students to an environment that's not safe. So there are some safety components in LEARNS when we talk about dollars to make our schools safer, dollars to make sure teachers are trained in safety, but to look at capital projects, that's not necessarily addressed in LEARNS, but you teach on a very big reality. And when you look at the number of districts in this region and the number of facilities they have to maintain, there are some of our oldest facilities, and we actually have committees that look and rate those facilities and help fund that. But when you look, compare this region to other school districts who have higher property values and are able to raise local capital dollars through local property taxes that stay in the community, it's a lot harder for this region to compete. So that's something I think we always want to look at, some innovative strategies, because students all across the state deserve access to the best teachers that we can give them and the best facilities that we can provide for them. So.
And one thing we did do, and I can't remember the exact dollar amount, but we'll make sure we get it by the time we wrap up and get to you, but we did increase facilities funding through Arkansas LEARNS, and I can't remember the exact figure, so that there would be more available funds for districts to go after when they're doing that rating system. But I can't remember the dollar figure off the top of my head, but we'll make sure we get that. But it was a pretty substantial amount, in the millions of dollars, double-digit millions of dollars, additional funding on top of what already exists in facility funding for the state. Do you remember? We'll get that. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Carolyn Elliott. I'm from Mariana, and first I want to commend. My name is Carolyn Elliott. I'm from Mariana, Arkansas. First, I want to commend you on having the courage to put together the LEARNS Act. I have two quick statements and a question. Number one, as far as the community service piece, Act 648, we need insurance to cover those bodies, because in 1988, when the country decided to have a Democratic-Republican compromise bill, National Community Service, I was one of the people working with that. I worked with Senator Cole to fashion Act 648, but we didn't have the capacity for all communities to put their children into community service activities. But we did it because we knew that part of the problem in every one of our communities is that there's no connection between there's little connection between the learning, what has to happen in the community, what causes community wellness. So that's a fantastic piece that you put in there. But as I went through the LEARNS Act, a flag went up. One was, thank you for having the courage to raise teacher salaries, but also the question is, the statement is, there needs to be accountability for every educator in a school building in terms of their evaluation and their pay. We should not allow educators to be paid and all those students failing. That's just unacceptable. And my question is, when I looked at the LEARNS Act, the land ordinance of 1785 and 1787 was the foundation by which the United States put together that Act of 648, because in every 16th section of every township there shall be. So with the LEARNS Act, though, if you look at it, it takes apart the land ordinance of 1786, 1787. Now, all of the things we've been discussing in this room, we can work those things out. It's minor things. We just sit down and do that. And I'm a system specialist, I should say. I work on systems. So I looked at your bill, and I said, how is this going to affect the system in Arkansas for everybody? Because everybody wants to have the freedom to send their kids. The only question is everybody going to have the same yardstick for evaluation? Do they have to follow state guidelines like public schools, private schools? So then, yeah, everybody goes where you want to go. But this particular piece of legislation, it says, under the ordinance, how did the land ordinance of 1785, 1786 impact public education and slavery? Under the ordinance, slavery was forever outlawed from the land of the Northwest Territory. Freedom of religion and other civil liberties were guaranteed and peted out. The residents, Indians, were promised decent treatment, and education was provided for everyone. So, in a sense, if we allow an inequitable way of assessing the state dollars, everybody gets state dollars, everybody should have access to federal dollars as far as I'm concerned, but there needs to be the same matrix of assessment for wherever those dollars go. Otherwise, we are in direct conflict with the Land Commission Ordinance of 1785.
Well, that's a lot to break down, but I'm going to do my best, and then I'm going to make Jacob do all the parts I miss. That's the beauty of being at the top of the billing ticket, so I can make him go second. One of the most important pieces that I think that you said in your statement, as well as part of your question, was what does this do to the system? And I think the quick answer is I hope it breaks it into pieces, because the system that we have is failing our students. It is not working. There is literally not a single piece of data, especially when you look at the districts here in the Delta, where the system is exceeding where it should be, exceeding expectations. And frankly, our kids deserve to be in a system that exceeds expectations, not just hits a basic benchmark line, but goes well beyond it. And so my hope is that this breaks the system into pieces and that we're able to give every single student in the state of Arkansas access to a quality education. Now, I know that is like pie in the sky thinking, but I think it's doable because we're seeing it happen in other places. If we're willing to take on the challenge, if we're willing to be uncomfortable for a little while and we're willing to challenge the status quo, we can break the system and build one that we know works for our state and for our students. And that's what I'm hopeful that this does. I'm not sure about the specific land ordinances, and that's something I would have to look into, but what I do know is what we're doing is broken. And what we are doing now is putting our kids in a place where they have an opportunity to see success, where they have an opportunity to get a quality education that they deserve. And that is the ultimate goal. And I think that this helps get us one step closer to doing that is through this legislation.
And when you talk about systems, I always like to say bad systems beat good people every time. So what LEARNS does, it is from cradle to career, aligning a system so that every child has access to individualize their learning paths that best meets their unique abilities and needs, starting from access to early learning, what's happening in those foundational literacy and numeracy periods, knowing that a one-size-fits-all approach doesn't meet the need of every child. So how are we looking at, one of the things that I'm really excited about, we actually have work groups working on this, is we're tasked with developing a career and technical education high school diploma. I think that's one of the most innovative things that I've ever seen come across legislation or ideas that's going to transform our approach to how we create these learning pathways for our students. But we also got to hold school districts accountable for learning, accountable for dollars, and accountable for making sure that we can report to the community on how they're doing. And part of this reset in the systems, even from a classroom perspective, is we're supporting teachers with new standards that are clear and concise. We're giving them training and instructional materials that are aligned. We're building out a new assessment system so that we can measure what we expect students to know and learn. And this system is all going to support and reinforce the fact that we can meet the needs of our students when we are able to better be informed about the education that they need.
The point maybe I was clear about is that this is a Learn Act, but in Arkansas, when I was at the state, 86% of our income was going to public education. In our state, taxes, land, and education are virtually inseparable in a way. You know, there's so much interconnectivity there. So once you start, it's like pulling a string on a dress. Yes, you're brilliant in terms of this is going to break it apart. It is going to break it apart. All I want us to be conscious of is what do we plan to do to put it back together when it comes apart, because it is going to do that. It's time for us to change. We need to do that. We have enough sense to do it. Let's just do it, but be aware that it is going to tear everything apart.
Two things. One, I heard you say I was brilliant, and I just want to make sure the rest of the room heard you say that too. So I just wanted to reiterate that. And two, I think that's what LEARNS is. It's the plan to put it back together. So I don't disagree, but I think this is our blueprint for putting it back together and moving the state forward. Yes, sir.
Andrew Bagley, how in the world? And since my radio colleague dipped his toe in the water on the issue of choice, I'll just do the cannonball off of the high dive. We have 2 level 5 districts in Phillips County. There's another one in Lee County. Choice it has been a much discussed piece of empowering parents. And since we have representatives in the room from at least one private school trying to decide what to do, and parents that are in these level 5 schools asking themselves the question, what are my options? The private schools are not currently on the list to accept EFAs in our area. So that limits the choice. And then the choices that are available have limited facility capacity. What would you say if you were trying to convince the private schools locally to apply to accept the EFAs, and what would you say to the parents in the meantime about what they should do?
So the first thing I would say to a private school that's interested in learning more information is to call us. We would love to talk to you and talk to you about what does it mean to qualify to be able to be a provider to families in the community that they're already serving to participate in the educational freedom accounts. That's one of those areas I still think there's misconceptions and beliefs, because I've heard from private schools as we've talked to them is that if we were to allow them to participate, they would have to throw away their entire curriculum. They wouldn't be able to focus on their core values and missions, and that's not the case. There are requirements, there is accountability, but it's all achievable, and we would like to have conversations with them. And this is year 1, so I almost kind of don't blame people to say, let me see how the first year goes before we jump in and do the cannonball off the high dive and get into this space, because maybe I need to see how year 2 goes. But what I would say to families is you have the opportunity to make the educational decisions that works best for your child and your family. And this investment, we are starting with the local schools in the local school district. You said there's 3 top or tier 5 schools or level 5 schools in the county and some neighboring. This initiative is about to get those schools out of that space. And we heard a lot when LEARNS was being developed and through the legislative process and feedback and questions is that this is designed to hurt small and rural districts or to force them to close their doors. That is nothing further from the truth. In fact, this is the largest investment we can make in small and rural districts. When you make the salary adjustments that's going to be impacted in the communities right here in this region, when there's more disposable income in family households, the whole community feels that. We were able to enter into the LEARNS initiative what we call a transformational contract to give external operators in charter networks the ability to work with districts, which is about supporting and keeping the districts open. The school districts are the lifeline of a lot of small communities. In fact, a lot of these smaller communities, and actually a lot of the communities in the state, the school district is the largest employer. So if we can invest in the schools, if we can invest in salaries, that is going to be helped by communities. And most importantly, we want to make sure that parents have choices that work best for them, and they are quality choices.
Absolutely. I don't have a lot to add there, but I think one of the big things as a parent of 3 kids, all 3 of my kids learn very differently and they need different things. And so opening up those options helps put the power into the hands of parents. However, to Secretary Oliva's point, we want one of the best options to be that public school. That's why we have invested so heavily into public education in the state. This is the single largest investment as a state that we have made in decades directly into public education, not just through teacher pay salaries, but through the facility funding increase, classified staff, literacy programs, a number of other things, the career and technical training programs. There are so many opportunities that are adding to the public school experience, not taking away from it. This is something that should help those schools go from being in that category 5 to moving away from that and continuing to do better, so that one of the best choices for students in the area is the public school. And that is the hope and the ultimate goal that we want to see come from LEARNS. I know we are running tight on time, but we've got a couple more questions that we've got time for, but I know people's lunch break will likely be ending soon, so.
Thank you. First, Mayor of Elaine, Lisa Hicks Gilbert. First thing I want to say is thank you so much for showing every educational system here present today what a town hall looks like. This is how you do a town hall, allowing voices in the room to be heard. So I hope moving forward, all of those town halls that I attend, that they give parents and those in the community the mic to have a voice. I'm from Elaine, and our babies attend Marva Elaine, Barton, and KIPP. So they're split up between 3 schools. There was a lot of that choice before the LEARNS Act. But there are 2 components of the LEARNS Act I will be paying close attention to. And that is the literacy part. Our babies are so far behind. So I am counting on this, on the LEARNS Act, to help us with that. And then the accountability piece. Keeping my eye on the educational systems in the schools, the school boards, just everyone, just showing up, being present, and empowering our parents to be present in these spaces to ensure that our children are learning, and also, more importantly, that the people tasked with teaching them are being held accountable. That's a huge piece for me, is making sure that those teachers, those school board members, those superintendents, that they're allowing those parents in so we can have parental involvement, because that has not been the case at Marva Elaine. You know, we've tried. And so I'm excited about the LEARNS Act. Not agreeable with all parts of it, but at this point, our children need assistance, and whatever and whomever on whatever side of the aisle is going to help our children. In Elaine, we're putting everything aside. No matter who you are, where you come from, we're going to focus on our babies, and we're going to put them first above anything else. And I'm asking everyone at Marva Elaine, Barton, and KIPP, and any other school to join us in that. And when our babies get there, help us, help them, help us, help our parents. We're ready to come in, and we're on board 100%. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I can't speak for the other districts, but I can certainly speak from the state perspective. Number one, thank you for the role that you play and your willingness to work with all of the people in your region. But I can speak for the state, and we want to be a good partner. The reason we are here right now, the reason we have invested so heavily, is because we know the importance of education, but that doesn't work if we don't have good partnership at the local level. And so we're going to continue to show up. We're going to continue not just to focus on 2 of those letters, but all 6. You have a commitment from me, and I'll speak for Secretary Oliva too. He doesn't mind when I do that sometimes, but I can assure you we are fully committed to being a good partner, because we want the exact same thing. We want the kids, whether it's in Elaine or Barton or Helena or Jonesboro or Little Rock or Texarkana or wherever it may be, to be successful. And we know that access to quality education is the first step. And that comes with all of us working together. If we're spending all our time fighting, you know who loses? The students. It's not us, it's the kids. And we can do better, and we have to, because they deserve a lot better than what we have been giving them. So I can tell you, this is not going to be easy. It is going to come with a lot of challenges. There are going to be some uncomfortable conversations that probably neither one of us are going to like, but I'm willing to have them. I'm willing to continue showing up, sitting at the table, and being part of conversations like this, because I know the value that comes from them. And I know that ultimately the person and the people who win are the students, and that's why every person is in this room. So thank you for what you're doing, and thank you for having interaction, and we'll continue to do that on our side as well.
And thank you also for serving your community as a mayor and being an advocate for the community. And I would tell you, as a state, we're fully committed to engaging in that dialogue and conversations. And I'll speak for some of my peers that I see here. I know we have some local superintendents and educational cooperatives that have that same passion, commitment. What my ask would be, and we ask teachers to get the snapshots of how students are doing in time throughout the year, and we call that progress monitoring. We need to do that too with engagement with the families and how we're doing, and are we holding up to our end of the bargain. And we cannot wait till this summer to look back over an entire year and say, did we do what we were saying we're going to do? We need to hold each other accountable, getting that snapshots in time, because we don't have another year to lose. We are acting with urgency now. These young scholars are walking into our hallways next week. We better have these systems in place if we're going to get them the educational opportunity that they deserve.
Sure, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Drew Smith. I'm the Vice President of the Helena West Helena School District, and I'm the Director of Enrollment Management here at Phillips Community College. As a former teacher, I want to thank you for the raises for teachers, and you can expect to see me coming up there every session to advocate for continued progress for those ladders as well. My question is about the Career Ready Diploma. So as a community college, Joe St. Columbia, who I think is behind me, has done a fantastic job of putting together this career development program that utilizes a lot of the partners that we're here celebrating this morning and other partners throughout the community to really create a robust program. And I'd like to see, considering that we have 6 schools within a 30-minute drive of here, instead of every high school developing their own program, that they really utilize the community college, which I know the LEARNS Act provides for. My question is about, how do you envision that rolling out? Are there going to be funds available to pay for those spots for students in community college classes?
First, I commend you on what you're doing, because I think our community colleges are one of the linchpins specifically for a state like Arkansas. We so desperately need our community colleges to be successful, and we need them to engage in a lot of the programs in partnership with high schools. One of the things that Secretary Oliva mentioned earlier that is a key piece and something we're really excited about in LEARNS is the dual track diploma that allows students in high school to graduate, in many cases with certifications and ability to go directly into the workforce. It doesn't matter where I go in the state, whether I'm in Northwest Arkansas or Southwest Arkansas or Central Arkansas, or what type of business leader I meet with. Without fail, the number one thing every business owner will tell you that their greatest challenge is hiring a skilled, qualified workforce. Across the country, we have failed to meet the demand of the workforce out there, and we can do better. And that's one of the things that our community colleges are going to play such a critical role. And there are going to be a lot of students that don't need to go to a 4-year university. And we have perpetuated a lie for decades that if somehow a student doesn't go to a 4-year university, they are less than, when nothing could be further from the truth. There are so many different opportunities and so many amazing opportunities for students to be successful that don't require a 4-year diploma. And community colleges are going to play a big role in that. Partnering with those high schools, helping create those programs. And what we have to do, though, is make sure it's industry driven. We can't go out and create 100 welders when we only need 50. And so right now we are in assessment mode. We created what I call the workforce cabinet. I found out very quickly during our transition period post-election, before actually taking office, that we have 7 different agencies within state government that have a workforce development component. And I asked how often they met, and I was told that they had never sat down at the table together. I could not believe that 7 different entities that all work in the same state government, tasked with doing the same thing, had never met and were not coordinating their efforts. So we created the workforce cabinet, and now that's what they're doing. And we also hired the chief workforce officer, a guy named Mike Rogers, who came from the private sector, who wakes up every single day figuring out how we do exactly that. He's been traveling around meeting with all of the heads of community colleges. I believe he's been here. If not, I know he will be here because his report's due in a couple of weeks. So he is doing an assessment of what programs we have, which ones are working, which ones ultimately end in employment, and helping build a statewide network that actually is outcome driven. Because if we have some amazing programs at community colleges, but they don't result in students having a job at the end, then they're kind of worthless. So we have to make sure that they're outcome driven. So we're doing that assessment right now and working with every community college doesn't need to specialize in healthcare. So let's figure out who can be our healthcare like go-to community college, help give people some of those foundation courses they need that they can build on in the future. If you spend a little time in a community college, that also doesn't mean your educational journey ends. I steal this from Secretary Oliva. That's just a place where you can keep building from. And so we want to continue to expose kids to the various opportunities that exist in their own backyard. The community college here is a great opportunity for all of the high schools in the area to partner with and help put those kids on those pathways and make sure that it is outcome driven. We're going to continue to be a partner in that. That's one of those cooperation and collaboration pieces where we all have to be working together for it to ultimately be successful. But thank you, because I think our community colleges are going to be, frankly, one of the true difference makers in whether or not our state is successful or not.
And
Joe State Columbia, I'm just going to interrupt. Last thing, if you're hungry, because it's right about that time, best tamales in the state. So.
And just to add to that, which is what the workforce cabinet's working on, with the task force that's looking at that career high school diploma as asking those same questions. One of the things that we have to instill in every community is we have students that are capable of being accelerated. And we need to be honest about, is the system holding these students back? So I've been pulling a lot of data because there's a lot of school systems, they'll say Algebra 1 is a 9th grade course. Less than 17% of the students in the state of Arkansas took Algebra 1 or a high school credit in middle school. I'm telling you right now, there's students that are capable of being pushed, and we're not providing those opportunities. That number, if you look at just even our readiness rates based on ACT Aspire, it would tell us that 50 to 60% of our students are ready to be accelerated at math at earlier years, but yet 17% of them are doing that. When you look at concurrent credit, this past year we graduated 117 students that earned at least an AA or an AS degree with their high school diploma. There should be a 0 behind that 117. There are way more students that are capable of earning and doing college while they're still in high school. Are we creating the articulation agreements for that to happen? We have to fix that. Do we have a funding mechanism to define how much the school districts are to charge for tuition? We have to fix that. There's some key pieces in place that we have to address, but we also got to be telling students you deserve to be in school. 47% of our seniors this past school year, just over 15,000 of them, didn't have a full schedule. Where are they going and why aren't they coming to you?
Well, again, we want to be certainly respectful of everybody's time. I want to say thank you so much for being willing to spend a big part of the middle of your workday here with us. We certainly appreciate it. I think it shows the level of commitment that this area has to education. You have some amazing educators right here in the room, several who I've known for a really long time, and I know we're going to continue to be committed to making sure that the students in this region of our state are successful. And I can assure you that we will be great partners in that process, because ultimately we want the same things. We want our kids to win. We want our kids to hit that top level, and we know that they're capable of it. Frankly, if we didn't think they were capable, we wouldn't do any of this. We wouldn't care. We'd just pack up our toys and go home. But we know not only our kids are capable, but they're so deserving. They are deserving of access to a quality education, and we're going to work with you to make sure that they get it. So thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for letting us spend our time with you, and we look forward to being back here many, many times to see the success story that comes out of this. So thanks so much.